Hey everyone, me Kevin here. I've got a full report here on what Elon Musk just said at the All In podcast. We had about 90 minutes hearing from Elon Musk, so I'm going to go through everything. We're going to start with Twitter, then we're going to talk about the recession. We're going to talk a little bit about Tesla, not all necessarily in this order. We'll also talk about potentially just creating a replacement platform for Twitter, so we'll talk about that. Some of these things might be a little bit out of order, but we're going to go in the way that Elon Musk spoke, so it's going to be in Elon order. All right, here we go. Right after, of course, remember, that code link down below does expire tonight. Largest price increase ever. Check that out. We've also got coaching calls on sale. And, some people are like, oh, stock market's red. Kevin's got more products. Well, it's actually what I say. Remember, I'm a person who likes to do what I say. And so when I tell you I'm going to do something, I do it. What I do is not necessarily a recommendation for other people, but I do recommend that when the market is falling, you should work harder so you can buy more. All right, let's get into it. So number one, Twitter. Elon Musk starts off by talking about how right now he's debating the number of bots that Twitter has. He says currently there's just no way to know the number of bots. It's unknowable to the human soul that you need some like witchcraft or alchemy to basically figure out how many bots there are. And then he kind of rhetorically jokes, have you tried? And so he mentions how we could have one person who could authorize 1,000 different accounts. And so that what we really need on Twitter is real people. Instead of 1,000 by one, just 1 to 1. Because it's not like you're going to sell one toaster to 1,000 bots. You'd sell it to one person. And that one person represents 1,000. It's disproportionate. But it's also potentially disproportionate for the political implications. That all of a sudden, if politicians who are leaning a certain way have tons of bot farms supporting them, you're really squeezing out free speech by flooding it with supportive or anti-speech towards particular politicians. So that you've really got such a massive problem with bots. And Elon Musk suggests, look, it's quite ridiculous. Like, this is not like splitting the atom. We should be able to solve this quite easily, just like it should be easy for Twitter to tell us how many bots there are. So Elon Musk said it, quote, seems beyond unreasonable for Twitter to claim that the number of real humans are at over 95%. He says, does anyone actually have that experience? Yes, rhetorically. And the audience sort of erupted into laughter there. He believes that there are probably 4 to 5 times as many bots as Twitter has actually disclosed in their public filings. And this is kind of suggesting that Twitter's revenue could potentially be 20% less valuable. Therefore, a 20% discount, consider this at $54 roughly to make math easy, would be somewhere here on the fly at what, $10.40, right? So that's quite substantial. These are things to keep in mind when we're considering this. So then we've got, actually, what is that, 10%? That's $5.40 times 2. No, that'd be more. That'd be $11.60. See, math on the fly. Anyway, that's a lot, right? But Twitter's obviously fallen substantially more than that already. But that's because of the likelihood of the deal not happening. If Twitter comes out and says, yeah, you're right, we've actually got this many bots, which they won't do, imagine how many shareholder lawsuits they'd face that basically their revenue has been overestimated by 20%. It'd be ridiculous. But anyway, Elon Musk sort of, and I think I might have an answer for this one. I'm not trying to say I have the answer to everything, but he argues that why is it that I have the most liked tweet in the world? And it's the tweet that has 4.7 million likes, and it's the tweet that says, next I'm buying Coca-Cola to put the cocaine back in. Elon said, obviously, the public really wants this, and so we should go back to Coca-Cola's roots. He's obviously joking here, but he says, how can a tweet like this represent only 2 to 2.5% of the entire user base of Twitter? And so this is where Elon Musk challenges, really, like, it should have a higher like ratio. And the folks up on stage from the All In podcast, they're like, yeah, I mean, well, like, why is it that you have maybe 1 billion people who watch YouTube videos and the most popular YouTube videos have tens of billions of views? And I actually think there could be a potential reason for that. See, only about 5 to 10% of people who are actually viewers actually click the like or dislike button on a video, but still watch it, right? So there's going to be a difference between like clicking on a video and watching it, which you don't really get. You kind of get like an impression metric on Twitter. It's like, well, did somebody really read it, or were they scrolling, they looked away, and then they went back to scrolling, right? So it's harder to measure those sorts of impressions. And then how many people actually care to press the like button? Maybe it's only 1% of people. Nobody really knows. Twitter's supposed to know, but apparently they don't. And so all this uncertainty is really pissing Elon Musk off. He talks about how we should have that open source algorithm, and that really, he talks about how ultimately he needs the data, and the more questions he asks, the more concerned he gets. That was a quote from him. The more questions he asks, the more concerned he gets. And then he kind of responds to this idea that he's like trying to pull a right-wing takeover here because that's how the far left is kind of characterizing this deal. And he's like, I might have never voted Republican in my life. Like, this is not a right-wing takeover. It's more of a what he calls a moderate takeover. And so, this is where he talks about bots influencing public opinions, believes that there are problems on both sides, Democrat, Republican, right? Democratic side, you've got issues with unions sort of being a monopoly. Right side, corporations and religion. And then he talks about also, like, how do we measure ads? If ads are impression-based and bots are creating a lot of impressions, how is that fair to companies that are trying to promote their brands? Now, I'm a big fan of using different metrics to evaluate how good ads are. Those are going to either be actual product conversions, or if you're doing a brand campaign, people usually do sentiment surveys or recurring customers. Are you losing your recurring customers, or are you getting more recurring customers because of that brand loyalty? Usually you can measure these things quarter to quarter with seasonal adjustments by knowing when you've started your campaign for a certain advertising effort, right? These are ways companies can evaluate ROI. But yeah, I get, obviously, like if Twitter's giving you, here's how many people saw your stuff, well, maybe there's an impressions mismatch there. So I get that. Then Elon Musk was asked, hey, how many companies are really in Tesla? And he's like, well, we do a lot. In fact, he says GM and Ford actually don't do that much. Big diss to them. He's like, they don't do sales, they don't do service, maybe they make their engines, but they use suppliers for most things. And then he says, we do everything. We do almost everything. We do sales, we do service. We have the largest network of superchargers, by far the most large network of superchargers, and the most advanced. We make the battery packs, the electronics, the drive unit. We make all of these. We make the GPUs. The pace we need to move is substantially faster than the pace that existing supply chains can actually move. So that's why we're internalizing so much of this and doing this ourselves. We make the software. We make the software that controls the car, the charging infrastructure, the battery management system, the screens. It's all by Tesla. It's Tesla's operating system. And, of course, now they're working on the advanced real-world AI in-house from scratch, FSD, so on and so forth. So he's really making this contrast there. And this isn't even to touch on yet the insurance industry, which is very inefficient. Elon says, why is it that you have to pay 30 to 40% of your payment on, let's say, a lease for a car for insurance and then not get rewarded for driving better? He says if you're 20 years old, you get destroyed for being 20 and getting insurance just because you're 20. And statistically, 20-year-olds drive less bad. But if you're a good driver, or you're incentivized to drive well because you're watching your safety score and in real time you're getting a lower insurance premium, well, now not only do we promote safer driving, but we can also give cheaper insurance to the people who are less of a risk. I definitely drive safer with my safety score. I pay a lot of attention to my safety score. It's 100. But when I get in a car, like a rental car, and I don't have a safety score, let's go. Anyway, will the Twitter deal close? Well, this is the sort of big question here. This is where he says, it depends. He's waiting for a logical explanation on the spam accounts. He says that Twitter is refusing to tell him, that they claim it's a complex methodology that can only be understood by few. It's like the definition of arcane right there. So this is where he's asked, well, could the deal be done at a lower price? And he responds, not out of the question. Now, he doesn't really imply that he's negotiating, but the people asking the question on stage from the All In podcast, they imply, like, well, I mean, this sounds like could be a good opportunity for you to negotiate. Anyway, Elon makes this analogy. He goes, look, if I'm the buyer of a house, which strikes home, obviously, as a real estate broker, if I'm the buyer of a house, he says, and I'm told the house is 5% termites, but it's actually 90% termites, then the house is worth less to me. You're not actually buying a house. You're buying a termite in that example. I thought that was pretty funny. Anyway, then we briefly touched on this idea maybe of creating a new app, maybe one that could handle payments. And Elon talks about how ridiculous it is that during the stimulus check time, we're still mailing checks when PayPal's been around for like 20 years. Instant payments, much faster than mailing checks around. And so a little bit of this talk about starting over and just making something new, especially with all the attention from engineers Elon's now attracted, how we could recruit the best engineers. And Elon says, look, quote, my default inclination is to start things from scratch. SpaceX started from scratch. Tesla started with essentially from scratch with like 5 people. And really, yeah, there is this potential of just starting from scratch. And so obviously Twitter fell like, it went from like -5% on the day to like -8% on the day, which was pretty wild. Anyway, now I got security looking at me like I'm a freak. Anyway, so then we've got SpaceX. And the goal with SpaceX is to make life planetary. And I thought this was funny. He goes, if we find aliens, I'll definitely tell you. if we find them, right? And then he goes, if we find aliens, SpaceX would probably get a lot more revenue. This is also kind of funny. Then he talks a little bit about how we could build satellites on the moon or in remote locations or bigger telescopes to kind of see the world a little bit better. Chamath asks, hey, well, is there really enough profit in these, or do you need government support? And he goes, look, what we really need is, sure, government support would help. It's going to be very expensive, but what if we get to World War III and then we break the opportunity for us to go multiplanetary? There's this big filter of life, and it's being able to get to another world and be able to connect the two and then create a self-sustaining civilization in another area. And so we're not sure we're able to do that, but that's obviously the goal, especially when we have such a low birth rate that we have right now. He's like, he kind of joked, like, people are worried about having too many babies being bad for the environment, and it's like, what? No, not at all. The environment can sustain maybe twice as many humans as exist now. On top of that, he also argues that, hey, we're in this place where some people will go to him and go like, oh, I don't want to bring a child into this world. And he's like, lady, have you read history? Anyway. So then he talks a little bit about California. And this was rough. He says, California has gone from the land of opportunity to the land of taxes, overregulation, and litigation. This is not a good situation. He says it took Giga Texas 18 months to be built, 3 to 4 times the size of the Pentagon. And he says in California, if we're trying to build this in California, I'd still be waiting for permits, which is kind of sad, but also quite true. It's pretty ridiculous in California. So he says that the people have to change to want this, though. There has to be an above zero chance that a Republican wins, because really what you have right now in California is a one-party state, and he kind of alluded to China here. He says even if you held a gun to Gavin Newsom's head to build a Tesla factory, he couldn't do it. Too many litigators, too much regulation, and that's why people are leaving California. Then he talks about recessions not necessarily being a bad thing. I've actually talked about this a lot. During the pandemic, I talked about how you want to pick companies that are going to get much more efficient from recessions. This is something that I've regularly done. Now, that doesn't mean I'm perfect with all my picks, but still up. And so the picks that I like to pick are companies that, when they do lay people off, they use that as an opportunity to keep the best possible talent. And see, Elon talks about this as well. He says, in a boom, everybody gets money, like fools get money. And really, as a result of this, you get a misallocation of capital. You get people doing things that they don't really need it for. And so a recession is kind of like an economic enema, which is, like when you clean out, the place where the sun don't shine. And I mean, if you think about it, you look at Carvana, they just laid off 1,200 people. You've got Robinhood, they just laid off 9% of their sales force. Uber's like, we're going to freeze hiring. Amazon's like, crap, we overhired. Yeah, because during a boom time, people spend money like crazy, and they don't realize that good times do end. This is one of the reasons that, I was going to buy a plane, and I'm like, well, crap, there's a chance we go into a recession next year, and I'm not going to be caught dead spending money on an asset that's going to potentially lose half of its value when people start tightening their belts again, and then you're screwed and you go bankrupt because you overextended, right? So you have to be, as hard as it is sometimes, like you pay your taxes and you protect the base. You don't want to get screwed being caught all in on margin. You don't want to get screwed being caught in really speculative deals and being all in on speculation. Really dangerous. So Elon Musk says we probably are in a recession, and that things could likely get worse, and that things could get worse for another 12 to 18 months. This, by the way, in the Q&A session afterwards, I asked the All In podcast folks about this, and Chamath and a couple of them responded, and they believe that we're probably going to see pain for, potentially through 2024 or maybe even 2025, that this is like, it's going to take a while. And then you kind of look back to the dot-com bubble. That took us from 2000 to 2003 to find bottom. So, personally, I think there's quite a good chance, higher likelihood than not, that markets find bottom before that and teeter above them. But this consistent bleed, I don't know, how much further can we go? We'll see. But anyway, Elon Musk talks about immigration, that how anybody who wants to work hard should be able to work in the United States. This is very similar to the argument I had when I ran for governor. I'm like, what? Like, if somebody wants to work here really hard and they waive away all their benefits, why don't we let them in? Like, why is it so hard for me to hire somebody from another country? I have to go through 2 years of applications, and they have to have a PhD or something. Like, what if I just have like somebody that I know in Ukraine who's like a really, really good worker, and they will do anything for a job here, and I could supply everything for them: insurance, housing, pay, everything. Like, they would be contributing to our GDP. Why are we not allowing that? Politics sucks. Anyway, then Elon Musk says, look, the obvious reason for inflation is the government printed a zillion more dollars than it has, and look, velocity of money held constant, you get inflation. Velocity of money has come down, but we still printed substantially more than that. So then he talks a little bit about China, and really the big takeaway from this was that he says the folks in China have a massive, huge work ethic. And when he was talked about the sort of difference between Americans and Chinese. He said, look, Americans, we got to step up our game. That Tesla's got a very strong work ethic, individuals at Tesla do, that great company, but he says, quote, the work ethic in China is exceeded on balance by the Tesla China team. In other words, like the work ethic in the U.S. is exceeded by the Tesla China team on average. And he says that this doesn't mean that there aren't hardworking individuals at Tesla in America. He's just sort of calling it like it is. Then we briefly circle back to some closing remarks, but then Elon has to take off. So that's literally everything Elon just said. And remember, link down below for the programs on building your wealth with that coaching call that's now available. Check out on that tonight. If you've got questions, email me at kevin@meetkevin.com. I am getting inundated with emails, people thanking me for all the lows for pros and all the crazy stuff and connections that we've got once you sign up. So you got to be patient with the emails. It does no good to send another email, but I just caught up on a bunch of them, and I'm going to do it again soon, so stay tuned. And I'll keep bringing you updates. Thanks so much for being here, and we'll see you soon. Bye.